else because there's nowhere else to go. He says, Ana laha. He says, today is my day, today I will help you. And the Prophet ﷺ will intercede. The Prophet ﷺ will intercede in the presence of Allah with words that never have been heard before, and the intercession will begin. The first benefit of the akhirah for all of creation comes from who? Rasulullah ﷺ. And on that day, the Prophet ﷺ describing himself, many of his attributes are mentioned in the narrations of hadith, verses of the Quran, other places. But one of those attributes which he himself describes is one of those attributes which gives us hope. Imagine this. Imagine that you know you're going somewhere really dangerous. You're going to go somewhere really dangerous and you're on your own. Nobody will help you. You will have your father there and your father will say, go away. Your mother will be there but she won't help you. You're on your own entirely. The only thing that will give us comfort is to know that there's somebody there to help us. This is the day of judgment. When the Quran says, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. The verses of the Quran describe the day of judgment. But what does the Prophet ﷺ say? أَنَا فَرَطٌ لَكُمْ. أَنَا فَرَطٌ. What does this word farat mean? The word farat in the Arabic language, it means that which you send ahead so that they can prepare for your arrival. The one that you send ahead so that they can make preparations so that when you arrive, everything is okay. The Prophet ﷺ says, O people, the day of judgment is a scary day. The day of judgment is a terrifying day. But don't worry, Ana faratun. I'll be there waiting for you. This is the nisbah of the Prophet ﷺ. That the purpose of the Milad is to create this link that we have with him ﷺ. And don't think that this link is just something that this ummah has benefited from. When I mentioned earlier that we say that this is the 1500th Milad of the Prophet ﷺ. Yes, it's the 1500th year since the Prophet ﷺ honored and dignified this earth with his presence. Otherwise, as we know, from the aqaid of the Ahlul Sunnah is that one of the first creations of Allah is the nur of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's a nur which has transcended even Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. Well before the creation of Adam alayhi salam, the Prophet ﷺ was in existence. Allah Ta'ala had created the nur of the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, some of the ulama mention, they say the sajda that the Quran speaks of, when he commanded, Allah Ta'ala commanded the angels to prostrate towards Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. Remember, this wasn't a sajda to Adam alayhi salam. Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam was the direction. What was it in that direction that Allah Ta'ala was honoring by this sajda of ta'zeem? The nur of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam that was shining on the forehead of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this is something which is mentioned in our book. Ulama Abdul Haq Muhaddith Zailbi, one of the heavyweight scholars of the Indo-subcontinent, a scholar that many of the chains of narration of hadith, for any scholar who is in the Indo-subcontinent, finds their way back to. The Delhi scholarship, Delhi family of scholarship. Delhi is a city, but there's a family of scholarship there that specialized particularly in hadith. And most chains of narration eventually find their way back to that family. Shaykh Abdul Haq Muhaddith Delhi, one of the heavyweight scholars of that family. He has a book of Seerah called Madarij-un-Nubuwah, 2 volumes. In the first volume of that book, these are the types of things he talks about. And he mentions that Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, the nur of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa was there. We see that as we go on and on and on, throughout all of the different prophets, there were 2 things that they did, every single prophet did. One thing that they did was that they told their people about Allah and their religion. And the second thing that every prophet did, from Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam all the way to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, was to foretell of the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. To mention the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and this is Milad. This is the Milad of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to tell your followers that in Akhirul Zaman, in the end of times, there will come a prophet, be ready for his coming. Every prophet did this. Again, you're probably thinking, maybe he's talking from himself. Let me take you to the Quran. What does the Quran say about Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam? Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, our prophet Jesus, as the Christians call him, he's our prophet. And as a matter of aqidah, remember this is important, as Muslims, our belief about Isa alayhi salam is that he wasn't killed. The Quran says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ. That they say that the Christians and the Jews of the time, they didn't kill him, he's not dead. وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ, nor did they crucify him. This is important because if anyone believes that Isa alayhi salam was killed or he was crucified, this is kufr. This is disbelief. Because the Quran expressly says he wasn't killed, he wasn't crucified. So it's important that we rectify our beliefs about Isa alayhi salam, Jesus. What does the Quran say about him and what were his words? When asked and when he speaks about his role, what was he doing, what was part of his duties to his ummah? One of the things as the Quran mentions is he says, وَمُبَشِّرًا بِرَسُولٍ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِي اسْمُهُ أَحْمَدٍ. What does this mean? The first part, Mubashir, I'll come back to. He says, I am Mubashir, about a messenger who will come after me. I am Mubashir, of a messenger who will come after me. Ismuhu Ahmad. His name will be Ahmad. Who is Ahmad? The mountains have a different name for the Prophet ﷺ. The heavens have a different name. The dwellers of the earth have a different name. The reptiles have a different name. The birds and all of the other creations have different names for the Prophet ﷺ. On the earth, we know him to be Muhammad. In the heavens, he ﷺ is called Ahmad. Look who's speaking. Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is the one. What does he call him? Ahmad. Where's Isa alayhi salam now? In the heavens. Isa alayhi salam, he wasn't killed, he wasn't crucified, he was taken up and lifted into the heavens. In other words, when Isa alayhi salam refers to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he's speaking his own language. He's speaking the language of the dwellers of paradise. He says that I am coming to tell you, I'm Mubashir of a prophet who will come after me, his name will be Ahmad. What does the word Mubashir mean? Because now this is important. Sometimes people translate this and they say that I am coming to give news of a messenger. This is the wrong translation, because if it was giving news of a messenger, the verse wouldn't have been Mubashiran. It would have been Mukhbiran. The verse would have been Mukhbiran bi Rasulin Yati. I am come to give news of a messenger who will come after me. But that's not what he said. That's not what the Quran says. Those who say that the Milad has no basis in the Quran, I wonder which Quran these people have been reading. Those people who try to undermine you when we celebrate the Milad of the Prophet ﷺ, but have no problem celebrating their children's birthdays. They have no problem celebrating graduations. They have no problem celebrating everything else. But the only problem is when the Sunnis celebrate the Milad of the Prophet ﷺ. Ajib. What does the Quran say? The Quran says about Isa alayhi salam. It says Mubashiran. What does tabshir mean in the Arabic language? The root word of this is tabshir. Tabshir means to give you something to celebrate. Bashara. Bashara means to give you something to be happy about. When you give somebody glad tidings, when you give them something that makes them happy, just to give news, mukhbir is different. If you give news, it might be good news, it might be bad news. Somebody who gives you good news is still mukhbir. Somebody who gives you bad news is still mukhbir. But when Allah Ta'ala speaks about the coming of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, He doesn't say mukhbiran. Allah Ta'ala says in the words of Isa Alayhi Salam, wa mubashiran. That Allah Ta'ala has given Isa Alayhi Salam the duty that tell your people to celebrate the coming of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Milad of the Prophet ﷺ is present in the Quran. The Milad of the Prophet ﷺ is present in the narrations of hadith and the practice of the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ. Tomorrow, one of the ways of showing gratitude towards the coming of the Prophet ﷺ is to keep a fast. Make an intention that you will keep a fast. Why do we keep fast on the date when the Prophet ﷺ was born? That he, alayhi salatu wasalam, the day that he was born was a Monday. The Sahaba noticed his actions, his habit, that every Monday he would fast. And when they asked him, Ya Rasulullah, we've noticed that you fast every Monday, why are you fasting? And he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, this is the day that I was born. So fasting on the day, why do we fast? Out of gratitude to Allah, that Allah has given us the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And know that Allah Ta'ala could have created us from any of the ummahs before. What He did, and He created us from the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Being created from the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the biggest gift that I and you will receive. Why? Because we have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just think of that sentence for a moment. We have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What does that mean? We have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who told us that Allah exists. Because of him we have Allah. We have him who told us about the Quran, the one who told us about paradise, the one who told us about Iman, the one who saved us from kufr. All of these things which Allah Ta'ala has given us have been given to us only because of the sadaqah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is why we need to create that link with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this link that we have with him, know that it will benefit in times of confusion. It benefits us in times of difficulty. It benefits us in times where you don't know what to do. And we're living in those times. As the Prophet ﷺ described the end times. And we are in those times.